Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, chamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth fruit from the vine. Blessed are you, our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Those are the traditional Hebrew blessings that accompany just about every meal, but especially on Shabbat. These are the blessings for wine and for bread. I wanted to share those with you because as we enter chapter 5, only 2 weeks left in our Lenten study, as we enter chapter 5 this week, the primary focus is around the Last Supper. Folks who were brought up into Christian tradition, like me, we associate the Last Supper with Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday. The figure of Judas Iscariot may come to mind. The scene of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples may come to mind. Professor Amy Jo Levine will indeed walk us through these scenes and will share just how shocking the language was. We like to think of Jesus as the servant of all, but Professor Levine says really the act that is performed of feet washing was really the act of an enslaved person. So imagine how shocking that language is. Not servant leadership that has been a little bit sanitized by corporate culture, but enslaved leadership. Doesn't that hit just a little bit differently? We often think of Judas Iscariot as the betrayer, but in fact, Professor Levine helps us to better understand that the language there beneath the Greek and the Hebrew may be better depicted as a handing over of Jesus or a delivering of Jesus. And that also hits a little bit differently. We'll learn that in the gospel, according to Mark, Judas Iscariot, who handed over Jesus to the authorities, putting in motion Jesus' execution by Rome, that in fact Mark provides no motive for Judas's actions there. Matthew provides the motive as greed, and Luke provides the motive as demonic possession. So once again, as we encounter the Last Supper scene, Professor Levine will remind us that each account should be savored on its own. We're very familiar with that practice in our study by now. But I wanted to begin with those Hebrew blessings because the blessings over wine, the blessing over bread, perhaps you associate that with communion. In fact, yesterday at Freedom's United Church of Christ, it was a communion Sunday, so I took communion yesterday, and boy, did that affect me in deeper ways this week. The act of communion is always very meaningful to me, always brings a tear to my eye as I pray over the wine and the bread. But boy, was that an impactful experience to me yesterday, having really been focused on studying the Lenten season, the Lenten journey, entering the Passion. Boy, it just spoke to me and hit me in my soul as I took communion yesterday. So those blessings that I just shared with you, those Hebrew blessings, the prayer book, the Siddur, that just means order, similar to Seder, the Passover order. You're going to learn about the Passover Seder in chapter 5 this week. So Seder, you can hear just by the English transliteration, is very close to Siddur. Siddur, the prayer book or order, Seder, the dinner order for the Passover meal. That the Amidah, which is a blessing that is typical for Shabbat or for the Sabbath, that began to come into formation as far back as the Second Temple period, the post-exilic period. So in the 500s before the Common Era. Now the Siddur, the Siddur wasn't finalized until about the Middle Ages, but in fact, its roots were there in the Second Temple period. So as Jesus blesses the cup, his blood poured out for you, the bread, his body broken for you. Boy, doesn't that make it yet even more real, more impactful to know that Jews throughout the country, throughout the world, that before, at least conservative and Orthodox Jews, before any meal will do the blessing over bread, and then a special ceremony on Shabbat when they bless the wine and the bread to begin the meal. This is a practice that there in some formation is with Jesus in the Last Supper with the disciples, and is still with us today in Jewish communities and in Christian communities through communion. So we're talking about a period in just the first century, and here we are, what's the year, 2022. So for 2,000 years, some form of this tradition has been with us. So I'll leave the academic stuff to Professor Levine this week, but I'm just hoping to animate how flesh and blood and real life this scene is. Now, we know that some of the firsthand accounts that appear in the gospel narratives probably were dressed up a little bit with some of the Hebrew texts. We're reminded of some of the framing from Marcus Borg that I helped to kind of set off the study for us to be like, well, I don't know if it happened just this way or not, but we know that this is true. Perhaps the factual truth of this might be a little bit closer to home as we learn about the Last Supper this week, just through the Hebrew blessings that I used to begin this video on a dreary Monday in Indianapolis at any rate. The last thing I'll say before I close out this video and send us into reading chapter 5 is to remind us of that characterization of the meek Jesus, which doesn't mean lowly and poor, although Jesus maybe was a poor guy from the Galilee, which was an agricultural area, not known for its wealth. But meekness really is about that enslaved leadership, that servant leadership, about not lording your power over others. We're going to encounter that characterization of meekness again in chapter 5. So we're beginning to see some things kind of come full circle in our study. And I hope that you are feeling all the knowledge that you have learned and shared with each other over the first 4 weeks of the study are really now paying dividends to you as you begin to study chapter 5. And as we move into next week, chapter 6, the final week of our study, as we enter Jerusalem for Holy Week this upcoming Sunday, which you may recognize as Palm Sunday, but maybe you're beginning to call that Leafy Branch Sunday for this Sunday as we begin Holy Week. So at any rate, Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, our Lord. That is the Hebrew blessing that in some form was around with Jesus at the Last Supper, and in just that form is with us for contemporary Jews today, and contemporary Christians recognize that with the Holy Sacrament of Communion. Okay, so get to reading chapter 5. I'll be back Wednesday with a discussion prompt. Y'all are doing such good work together as we're sharing resources, authors, books, commentators, etc. Gosh, thank you for everyone's contributions. If that's not your thing, that's okay. You can scroll on past those emails, but I certainly love the open sharing of the group. Okay, I'll leave you to it. Have a great week. Enjoy chapter 5, and I'll talk to you again on Wednesday. Peace.